Honorable Chairman, sir, members of this august House, friends, we must also collectively oppose it because someday this anti-federal knock will come at your door. ये उनके लिए सोचने की बात है जो इस बिल का समर्थन कर रहे हैं या समर्थन करने की घोषणा कर दी है, जो आज दिल्ली सरकार के साथ हैं। शायद कभी आपके पास भी जल्द ही आपके साथ भी ऐसा ही हो सकता है। सबका नंबर आ सकता है। उस वक्त जब नंबर आएगा तो आपको सिर्फ याद आएंगे मार्टिन न्यूमेलर के वर्ड्स। वो पुराने जाने माने शब्द हैं लेकिन मैं दोहरा रहा हूं। First they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I am not a Jew. Then they came for me and for you, and there was no one left to speak for us. Friends, what does, let me start with my two heads. What does this bill do textually first? And secondly, what is the consequence of that text? Let me deal with these two aspects first. दोस्तों, ये बिल एक सिविल सर्विसेज अथॉरिटी बनाता है और उसको व्यापक शक्तियां देता है सुझाव देने की, हर नियुक्ति, हर स्थानांतरण, हर चीज के बारे में, ग्रेड ए अफसर से लेके दानिश अफसर तक। व्यापक है, विशाल है। कौन किसी और की सरकार में वित्त का सेक्रेटरी बनेगा, कौन पीडब्ल्यूडी का सेक्रेटरी बनेगा, उनके बीच में अदला बदली कब और कैसे होगी, ये माननीय एलजी करेंगे निर्णय, न कि चुनावित सरकार। ये बड़े स्पष्ट प्रावधान है। मैं अभी आपको प्रावधान के नंबर नहीं दे रहा हूं। दूसरा, जितने भी सतर्कता के अधिकार क्षेत्र हैं और जितने भी नॉन सतर्कता, नॉन विजिलेंस, वो सभी केसेस अनुशासनहीनता के विषय में सब इस अथॉरिटी में आएंगे सुझाव के लिए और माननीय एलजी के पास निर्णय के लिए। इसका उद्देश्य बड़ा स्पष्ट है। उद्देश्य है एक भय और हिस्टेरिया का माहौल बनाना, एक खौफ पैदा करना, जिससे कि आप इन सभी सचिवों को कंट्रोल कर सके, जो कि दिख रहा है दिन प्रतिदिन। तीसरा, ये अथॉरिटी में 3 व्यक्ति हैं, चीफ सेक्रेटरी, प्रिंसिपल सेक्रेटरी और मुख्यमंत्री। और मुख्यमंत्री को बहुत बड़ा ओहदा दिया है, अध्यक्ष बनाया गया है। ये अजीब सा अध्यक्ष है दोस्तों। कोरम है 2 लोगों का, ये एक चेयरमैन है बिना चेयर के। मैंने वैश्विक और भौगोलिक रूप से आज तक कहीं नहीं देखा मेरे सीमित अनुभव में कि एक चुनावित चीफ एग्जीक्यूटिव 2 सचिवों के नीचे आएगा। ये 2 सचिव बैठ के निर्णय करेंगे, ये 2 सचिव बैठ के निर्णय करेंगे और वो मुख्यमंत्री वहां खड़ा होगा, देखता रहेगा, चुप्पी साधेगा या अपना डिसेंट नोट करवाएगा। और उसके बाद, और ये सब प्रावधान है, एक एक चीज में जो बोल रहा हूं प्रावधान है, उसके बाद ये निर्णय और सुझाव जाएगा पहले सुपर सीएम के पास और उसके बाद सुपर बॉस जो हमारे सामने बैठे हैं माननीय गृह मंत्री, ये सब गृह मंत्रालय में आएगा। चौथा दोस्तों, बाद में चौथा, जितने बोर्ड्स हैं, समितियां हैं, संस्थाएं हैं, वो सब, और इसमें बहुत हैं, महत्वपूर्ण हैं, अल्पसंख्यक संघ, दिल्ली सूरेज बोर्ड, दिल्ली जल बोर्ड, सो मेनी, लेबर वेलफेयर बोर्ड, वक्फ बोर्ड, ऐसे 20 की सूची हमने दी है न्यायालय में। उन सब की बजट बनाएगा ये एनसीटी सरकार। उनके काम होंगे एनसीटी के लिए, एनसीटी के लोगों के लिए, लेकिन उनके अध्यक्ष, उनके हेड को वहीं से अपॉइंट होंगे, सुपर सीएम या गृह मंत्रालय से। 5वां, जो दूरगामी नीतियां हैं सभी सिविल सर्विस के लिए, उनके टेन्योर के लिए, उनके स्थानांतरण के लिए, उनकी नियुक्तियों के लिए, कौन सी पोस्ट नाजुक है, कौन सी पोस्ट सेंसिटिव नहीं है, और उपयुक्तता, वर्ड इस्तेमाल किया सूटेबिलिटी, उपयुक्तता इस अफसर की इस पद के लिए, ये सब, और हेड ऑफ डिपार्टमेंट कौन होना चाहिए, ये सब माननीय सुपर सीएम और अंततोगत्वा हम जानते हैं कि जो सब चीज करती है नियंत्रण वो होम मंत्रालय। हर छोटी चीज के लिए, एक हर बड़ी चीज के लिए पूर्ण रूपेण व्यापक निर्बाध टेक ओवर, कब्जा, निर्बाध कब्जा है। माननीय प्रधानमंत्री, माननीय गृह मंत्री, आप जैसे उच्चतम पद पर विराजमान महानुभाव, क्या आप अफसर क्लासेस के लिए निचले से लेके सेक्रेटरी तक नीतियां आप बनाना चाहते हैं? कम से कम वो तो एक छोटे ओहदे वाले मुख्यमंत्री के पास छोड़ दीजिए। Sixthly, friends, the secretary, this is amazing. The annals of history of legislation have not seen bills like this. The secretary of the department is made in charge of preparing and authenticating every memo, including cabinet notes. Not bad yet. Disagreements between the secretary and the minister have to be recorded in writing and then sent to the LG, and the secretary in the act itself, in the bill itself says that the secretary may write on the note which he sends to the LG why the secretary thinks that the Council of Ministers is taking a decision contrary to law. Any law. Law means any law. Any law of India, in the opinion of the secretary, is being violated by the Council of Ministers, goes to the LG. It makes, friends, the elected government hollow. A chief minister paralyzed, unable to act. Any minister shivering before his or her secretary, and the bureaucracy looking up to the LG even for sneezing, and the LG of course looking up to the Home Ministry. ऐसे हालात को देखकर मुझे वो पुराना शेर याद आया दोस्तों, एक काफिले वालों तुम इतना भी नहीं समझे, लूटा है तुम्हें रहजन ने रहबर के इशारे पर. This bill, friends, eliminates 2 out of the 3 interlocking, fundamental, distinct chains and institutions which form the bedrock of any assembly-based democracy, and therefore they hit at the very root of the basic structure. These 3 interlocking chains, which are discussed in 10 paragraphs of the Supreme Court judgment, I wish somebody had read the judgment carefully before drafting the bill, are 1, a political executive through the Council of Ministers answerable to the people; 2, a civil service answerable to the political executive and hence accountable to the people through the political executive; and regulatory agencies which are an integral part of governance in any system. The bill simply eliminates number 2 and 3. Out of 3, it takes away 2. Friends, the object is not to make Hamlet the Prince of Denmark, not even the slave of Denmark, but to take over Denmark itself. It is to make Denmark a hollow shell, substitute NCT for Denmark. Its second impact is that it eliminates the accountability of the civil service completely. In doing so, it eliminates the very concept of Westminster-style democracy, which Delhi is supposed to be fully Westminster-style minus 3 subjects only. The civil service, friends, after this bill will jump, bend, crawl, answer at the behest of an external agency, be it the Home Ministry or the Super Chief Minister. There is not even a token diarchy of powers between the CM and the LG. It converts an impartial civil service into a dictatorial civil service. Shame. It gives a real example of that forgotten serial which I love to watch and all of you have watched. Yes, Minister. The civil servant is saying only no, Minister. Remember what Nehru said about the ICS. That time, Indian Civil Service says this is neither Indian nor civil, nor does it provide service. I'm not sure how accurately it will apply in 2023, but I think he came very close to it. एक म्यान में 2 तलवार नहीं है ये केस. म्यान भी एलजी के पास है और तलवार भी केंद्र सरकार के पास है. मुख्यमंत्री एक कोने में खड़े होकर तमाशा देख सकते हैं सिर्फ. My third head of submission to this august House, friends. This bill seeks to amend the Constitution by an act of Parliament. The Constitution and the debates underlying it all wanted Delhi to have all powers minus 3. This bill adds a 4th to those 3, and it does it magically without a constitutional amendment. It is indeed magic, even if it is black magic, because you can amend a constitution without a constitutional amendment.
Absolutely black.
Fourth, decimating 2 out of the 3 prongs of a Westminster-style democracy, which has an answerable and accountable civil service and a regulatory agency, clearly violates the basic structure, because the basic structure of an assembly-based democracy includes these 3 interlocking chains. I believe that that would be a very likely Supreme Court conclusion if at all this bill is passed. Fifthly, it also violates the basic structure in another manner. The principle of decentralized federal government that has already been a part of the basic structure from the days of Bombay in 1993, around the time, by the way, when 239AA was created. If there is one animating bedrock philosophy underlying 239AA, it is decentralized federal governance. Otherwise, why not keep Delhi as a mere large municipality under central government's control? Advani ji हुआ करते थे बहुत बड़े अधिकारी ऐसे municipal setup में पहले. Why not a mere union territory? You know, there are 10 of them. Delhi is the only one to have been given the constitutional status by a constitutional amendment. No other union territory. Why? Para 77 of the 2023 judgment partly answers that. I quote, "In the spiral of cooperative federalism, the Union of India must exercise its powers within the boundaries created by the Constitution. NCT Delhi, in having a sui generis federal model, must be allowed to function in the domain chartered for it by the Constitution. The Union and the NCT share a unique federal relationship. It does not mean that NCT is subsumed in the Union merely because it is not a state." ये मेरे शब्द नहीं हैं, ये उच्चतम न्यायालय के शब्द हैं. Friends, Delhi alone, out of 10 such territories, was given this constitutional status. Not only because federalism and the aspirations of the people of Delhi were recognized, but the idea was that you will not be able to amend it out of shape, out of character, without a constitutional amendment. You don't have it today. You have a statute. This arrogant government, and this is very interesting, this arrogant government first tried it by invading Delhi's special status in 2016 and 17. Forgotten now, by executive action without even a statute. We argued and we got a 2018 first Constitution Bench judgment which struck it down. It did it again by a second notification without a constitutional amendment and lost it, and the judgment came in 2023, few months ago. But friends, unfortunately there is no cap on deliberate foolishness. There is no bar to repetitive constitutional error. They have done this again. This time they have upgraded it from a notification to a statute, but still without a constitutional amendment. And even if this bill is passed, which I am sure it will not be, the result will be the same a third time. History will repeat itself. Friends, constitutional stupidity masquerading as power is by no means a new phenomenon, especially when reason falls on deaf ears. The result is always the same: जिहालत, हिमाकत और नफरत. संविधान का बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर दोस्तों लम्हों की बात नहीं है, सदियों की बात है. और अगर संविधान को सदियां सुनेगी, लम्हे नहीं, तो हम सबका उत्तरदायित्व बनता है कि हम उस संविधान की आवाज की हिफाजत करें. क्योंकि अदर नहीं तो संविधान चीख चीख कर कहेगा मुझे लम्हे नहीं सदियां सुनेंगी, हिफाजत से मेरी आवाज रखना. आज आप केंद्र में हैं, मैं आप पार्टी की बात नहीं कर रहा हूं, मैं बीजेपी की बात कर रहा हूं. आज आप ट्रेजरी बेंच में हैं, कल कोई और होगा. ये कायम रहेंगे कि ये कायम अच्छा किया आपने हस्तक्षेप किया, क्योंकि आपके कायम शब्द के लिए मेरे पास एक जवाब है. तुमसे पहले भी वो जो शख्स यहाँ तख्त नशीन था, तुमसे पहले भी जो यहाँ शख्स तख्त नशीन था, उसको भी अपना खुदा होने का इतना ही यकीन था, बल्कि बशीर बद्र को कृपया भूलिए नहीं। आप लोग सब जानते हैं उसको, मुझे भी कोट करते रहते हैं आप में से कई, बशीर बद्र को। उसने ही कहा था, शोहरत की बुलंदी भी पल भर का तमाशा है, शोहरत की बुलंदी भी पल भर का तमाशा है, जिस डाल पे बैठे हो वो टूट भी सकती है। तो इसलिए कायम शब्द का इतना अहंकार नहीं होना चाहिए। Sixthly, friends, let me read some seminal words in the 2023 judgment. Now, these are going to take a little bit of time. It's a longish quotation, but it's very important for this House. 10 paras, and I'm only reading selectively, of the Supreme Court. It's completely forgotten. I'll read a little quickly and fast. This is a unanimous judgment, not a single dissent. And these words have been ignored, and they are not my words. Even though it's long, pardon me, allow me to read it. It's the highest court of the country. In a democracy, each word I'm reading is a quotation, and I can assure you these words will come to haunt you. In a democracy, accountability lies with the people who are the ultimate sovereign. The cabinet, consisting of elected representatives, is collectively responsible for the proper administration of the country and is answerable to the legislature for its actions. The government is responsible for the decisions and policies of each of the ministers and of their departments. This creates a multi-linked chain of accountability, where the legislature is accountable to the people who elected them and the government is collectively responsible to the legislature. It's quite amazing. Collective responsibility is an important component of parliamentary democracies. The day-to-day decisions of the Council of Ministers are to be implemented by a neutral civil service under the administrative control of the ministers, in order to ensure that the functioning of the government reflects the preferences of the elected ministers and through them the will of the people. It is essential to scrutinize the link of accountability between the civil service professionals and the elected ministers who oversee them. Under the Westminster parliamentary democracy, civil service constitutes an important component of a triple chain of command that ensures democratic accountability. हर शब्द की धज्जियां उड़ा रहा है ये बिल, हर शब्द की. The triple chain of command is as follows. Civil service officers are accountable to the ministers, ministers are accountable to parliament, and thirdly, parliament legislature is accountable to the electorate. An unaccountable and non-responsive civil service may pose a serious problem for governance in a democracy. It creates a possibility that the permanent executive, consisting of unelected civil service officers who play a decisive role in the implementation of government policy, may act in ways that disregard the will of the electorate. In a federal polity, a fundamental question which arises is which would be the more appropriate authority to whom the civil service officers would be accountable. Everything which the bill is saying is dealt with here. In a democratic form of government, only one more para is left, friends, the real power of administration must reside in the elected arm of the government, subject to the confines of the Constitution. A constitutionally entrenched and democratically elected government needs to have control over its administration. If a democratically elected government is not provided with the power to control the officers posted within its domain, then the principle underlying the triple chain of command of collective responsibility would become redundant. That is to say, if the government is not able to control and hold to account the officers posted in service, then its responsibility towards the legislature as well as the public is diluted. The principle of collective responsibility extends to the responsibility of officers, who in turn report to the ministers. If the officers stop reporting to the ministers or do not abide by their directions, the entire principle of collective responsibility is affected. Therefore, GNCT ought to have control over the services. Now, I know there's a statute. I'll deal with their best defense, which has been raised by the government. But first, I've read to you 10 paragraphs. For those interested, from 102 to 111. Clearly, friends, this bill is therefore, in the light of these paragraphs, stillborn. It does not, indeed cannot remove the basis, which is this of the unanimous Constitution Bench judgment. These quotations I have just read are bedrock principles. This bill is simply providing provisions directly contradicting these bedrock principles. It cannot simply nullify a unanimous Constitution Bench. It must at least amount to removing its basis and rendering that judgment inoperable. I have just read to you passages which are impossible to remove the basis of. These are bedrock principles. How do you remove the basis? It is therefore trying to overrule directly a Supreme Court judgment. It therefore is an impermissible constitutional exercise if you try to nullify a Supreme Court judgment without removing its basis. It is not only does this bill insult the people of Delhi, it insults the Supreme Court. It insults our intelligence. कभी दिल में ख्याल आता है कि जैसे 1935 वाले गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया एक्ट में चुनाव जरूर रखे थे, लेकिन पावर नहीं रखा था कुछ भी। क्या यही कॉलोनियल मॉडल का आप कार्यान्वित कर रहे हैं आज इस बिल द्वारा? हम आपको चुनाव दे रहे हैं, पद दे रहे हैं, लेकिन पावर नहीं दे रहे हैं। Is this not an illegal power grab through the back door?
Yes.
Now, seventhly, friends, I come to the main defense, the only defense of the government, because you should know this, how wrong and how fallacious it is. It is based on clause 7A and B of the article. Can I just read? None of you need to be lawyers to understand this, the text of the, and you'll get the answer automatically. This is the entire defense. Parliament may by law make provision for giving effect to or supplementing, mark the word, for giving effect to or supplementing the provisions contained in the foregoing clauses, and for all matters incidental or consequential thereto. Friends, these words on bare text mean that to reinforce, operationalize, effectuate and implement the earlier provisions which provide the entire architecture for Delhi, Parliament can make laws. This was a provision put so that every time something is to be made to fill a gap, to plug a hole, you don't have to have a constitutional amendment. Parliament is sufficient to plug that hole, to reinforce the Delhi's architecture. Friends, the short point is, can you destroy or decimate that architecture and structure by resorting to a provision that says that the power is exercisable to reinforce it or implement it? ये इस प्रावधान के साथ विश्वासघात नहीं है क्या? 7A and 7B were created when implementing the true letter of, you could reinforce or plug the gaps without amending the constitution. It can never be used to destroy, to supersede, to bury that architecture itself. If this ridiculous interpretation is accepted, does it mean that by this brute parliamentary majority, today you have transferred services to the central government, tomorrow you will do this for each item, electricity, parks, highways, Waqf board, labor board? Then why not have Delhi as a municipality? Why create the constitutional architecture? And that too by using clause 7, which says supplement, reinforce, implement, incidental. At the end of para 46 of the 23 judgment, which nobody appears to have read, as far as the bill makers are concerned, it says again, if we interpret the phrase insofar as such matter is applicable, in a manner, insofar as such matter is applicable to union territories, in a manner to exclude a greater number of entries than what is already excluded, that is, in addition to 3, it will defeat the very purpose of granting a special status to NCT. This is the Supreme Court in para 46. In other words, friend, this government, like Alice in Wonderland, says words will mean what I say they will mean. That's their interpretation of 7. I will use 7 as a Brahmastra, not to supplement and implement 239AA, but to supplant it, to reduce it to vanishing point. The scalpel created to heal, to cauterize, to cure, to fill gaps, to make you more healthy, will now be used to stab and kill. Obviously, only Alice in Wonderland in this government is on the same page on this. दोस्तों, ये सब प्रावधान जैसे क्लॉज 7 है और इस तरह प्रकार के प्रावधान कई जगह होते हैं, आम चीज़ है, लोगों की आवाज़ को ज़्यादा सशक्त बनाने के लिए है, विकास और समृद्धि की गति और दिशा को प्रोत्साहित करने के लिए है, न कि वोट डालने वाली जनता को निहत्था बनाने के लिए, उसको बेबस करने के लिए। इस बिल ने ऐसे सभी उद्देश्यों को अपने माथे पे उल्टा करके रख दिया है। संविधान को इस प्रकार से विकृत करेंगे आप तो परवीन शाकर के शब्द पूरी तरह से लागू होंगे। ए मेरी गुलजमी तुझे चाह थी एक किताब की। अब संविधान वाली किताब की बात कर रहे हैं। ए मेरी गुलजमी तुझे चाह थी किताब की, अहले किताब का मगर क्या तूने हाल कर दिया। Those in the treasury benches adopting this are actually distorting it out of recognition. The fundamental error of the central government and of the Honorable Home Ministry is to confuse the existence of power with the validity of its exercise. For the last several days, we've been hearing curtain raisers coming from the Home Ministry that we have the power. We are not talking about competence. The question is, if you have the power, its existence is subject to substantive limits. 3-4 minutes more. What you do not have is the power to cross the Lakshman Rekha, which this bill is designed to cross. The question of competence to pass a law, which I am not at all addressing here, is quite different from whether the law is a valid exercise of such competence. Not when it violates the basic structure, not when it violates substantive provisions. Friends, the bill is designed to violate specifically all those substantive limits. This is beyond the remit of any statutory bill. Whether even a constitutional amendment can do it, we will see when they bring a constitutional amendment in a 4th round. But the statute being lower than the Constitution must go. The Constitution is itself challengeable if it violates the basic structure. That stage has not come. Turning now to my 8th head, and I'm finishing very quickly, just give me a few minutes more. It is convenient to forget, and this you'll be interested to know. Now that we are having a bill, we tend to forget this. There were no exigent circumstances on 19th of May when you passed the ordinance. The Supreme Court has said in 100 judgments, you must demonstrate how, quote unquote, it is necessary to take immediate action. Immediate necessity is distinguished from mere desirability. These are not my words, they are Supreme Court words. Expression necessity coupled with immediate action conveys the sense that it is imperative due to an emergent situation to promulgate an ordinance. Now I want to tell you, on 11 मई 2 महीने की जिरे और बहस के बाद ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बेंच ने निर्णय दिया। 6 दिन बाद 17 मई को कैबिनेट ने अप्रूव कर दिया ऑर्डिनेंस, लेकिन पारित नहीं किया, घोषित नहीं किया, क्योंकि वो जानते थे 2 दिन बचे हैं अभी उच्चतम न्यायालय के बैठने के लिए। 19 तारीख को उच्चतम न्यायालय अवकाश में जा रही थी।
The revised time given to you by the LOP was 1 second.
Some of my friends here are prepared to donate some time.
30 minutes. You have left only 13 minutes for Mr. Chidambaram.
2 minutes more. 2 minutes more.
So you will leave 11 minutes for him.
Yes, yes. Then there are other people to donate time to us. There are other people. On 19th May.
1 second.
Important legislation रहने के ये जरूरी है कि बहस अच्छी हो रही है। बहुत दिन के बाद बहस अच्छी हो रही है, सभी लोगों को सुनने में आ रहा है और नॉलेजेबल है, तो आप कंसीडर करिए, आपके हाथ में है, और एक 10 मिनट एक्सटेंड कर दीजिए।
Every minute used by you, doctor, will cut into the time of Mr. Chidambaram. No, initially both were given equal time. Then his time was increased.
माननीय अध्यक्ष,
Go ahead.
माननीय अध्यक्ष महोदय,
Last 1 minute.
17 तारीख को ये अप्रूव हो गया कैबिनेट द्वारा। इसको आप 19 की शाम को 5 बजे के बाद जब मैं घर जा रहा था कोर्ट से क्यों लाए? क्योंकि आपको मालूम है कि 19 तारीख लास्ट डे था कोर्ट के फंक्शनिंग का, उसके बाद अवकाश थी। क्या यू वेट फॉर 2 days fearful that the Supreme Court is sitting till 19th May? Is this not cheap tactics and chicanery at its worst? The deleterious effects of this ordinance were visible in the last 2 or 3 months it's been there. Governance is at a standstill. 2 bureaucrats are threatening to take majority decisions over the Chief Minister's head. The LG daily trespasses in all domains of elected reps. Heads of bodies funded and operated by NCT are approved and controlled by the Home Ministry. NCT is reduced to a fiefdom of the central government. Insubordination is at its peak. हमारी बात आप सुनते, मैं बस अंत कर रहा हूँ 1 मिनट में। हमारी बात तो आप सुनेंगे नहीं, सुनते नहीं हैं। कम से कम अपने मार्गदर्शक मंडल की बात तो सुन लिया करिए, या कभी कभी उनसे बात करते हैं, पूछते हैं, उनको भी भूल गए आप लोग। मार्गदर्शक मंडल से बात कर लीजिए, क्योंकि आपकी सरकार, भारत रत्न अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी की सरकार में आपके मार्गदर्शक गृह मंत्री अडवाणी जी दिल्ली को पूरा स्टेटहुड जाने का बिल लाए थे। और जब आप 2 चुनाव दिल्ली के जीते इस मुद्दे पे कि दिल्ली के पास पूरा स्टेटहुड होना चाहिए, तो मदन लाल खुराना जी, आपके पूर्व मुख्यमंत्री, ने कहा था, कोट, फुल स्टेटहुड फॉर दिल्ली इज द रेमेडी फॉर ऑल इट्स इल्स। आज देश और दिल्ली आपसे फुल स्टेटहुड नहीं मांग रहा है। आज सिर्फ वो इतना विनती कर रहा है कि जितना दाएं हाथ ने संविधान ने दिया है, उतना बाएं हाथ से तो नहीं लीजिए। इतनी छोटी सी विनती कर रहा है। जहां तक दुख और आक्रोश का सवाल है, ये एक दुखद और खतरनाक प्रस्तावित कानून है दोस्तों। अंत करूंगा मैं ये कहकर कि ये दिल्ली के बारे में शेर बिल्कुल उपयुक्त बैठाता है। ये बिल, ये प्रस्तावित कानून चेहरे पे सारे शहर के गर्द मलाल है, जो दिल का हाल है वही दिल्ली का हाल है, दुख और आक्रोश का हाल है।